What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA show powered by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/All-NBA. I'm Adam Mares. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Tim Legler. Legs, we got some interesting news to talk about. We got two interesting games with some benchings from players who have not been benched for over a decade. We got a lot to get into. How are you doing today?
I'm great, man. I had a very entertaining game. I can't wait to talk about that Minnesota Clippers game. We're going to get to that shortly because I was just, for a regular season game in early January, when you're like, okay, yeah, it's a decent matchup on paper, to get what we got. I'm going to dive into exactly why I was so impressed with what I saw last night. So I can't wait.
We're also going to end the show today by talking about some either ors, which I like. Who's more likely to win 70 games, the Cavs or the Thunder, and a couple other really fun either ors for you that I think everybody will enjoy. But we're going to start with some quick hitters. There are really just one quick hitter, and that is the news that Kyrie Irving is out at least 1 to 2 weeks with a bulging disc. That does not sound good at all. According to Jeff Stotts, who runs In Street Clothes, disc issues can be difficult to navigate and are often accompanied by a lengthy recovery. The average time lost for in-season disc herniations that do not require surgery is 28.7 days, roughly 12 games. The Mavs are 0-3 without Kyrie or Luka. Luka's obviously out till the end of the month. It sounds like Kyrie's out to the end of the month. They've lost 5 in a row right now. 2 weeks ago, I said the Mavs are going to ascend to the 2 seed and stay there for the rest of the year. From the moment I said that, nothing but bad luck has fallen on them. And Legs, I'm worried. If they both miss 3 weeks or more, I don't know what the Mavs' record is going to be.
Well, I'll tell you what it's going to be. It's going to be sub 500. And that, first of all, that's taking the optimistic approach on Kyrie Irving, assuming Luka comes back in the time frame they originally said. I mean, who knows how long it really is? Because you think about it, Adam, we're already January 7th. So you got what, 3 weeks left basically in January, and then you just got a handful of games in February before the All-Star break. So at some point, if these linger on and you get into late January, early February, and both of these guys are like still limited or they're not fully practicing or back, at that point, you might see the team say, you know what, we're going to get them back after the break. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Luka's back by the end of the month. Maybe Kyrie's only out a couple of weeks and he's back with a week to go in January and gets a handful of games in before the All-Star break. But either way, they're going to be under 500 for a team that went to the finals, that thought they got better in the offseason and was expecting to make another finals run. And maybe this time think they could get over the hump. You're now going to have to really dig yourself out of an incredibly deep hole. So this is terrible news for them. And they've already lost 5 straight. And I was just looking at their schedule. 7 of their next 10 games, I would label as very difficult games. Being Lakers, 2 at Denver, or 2 games with Denver, Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Oklahoma City, and Boston. Now, mixed in there, you got a Portland, you got a New Orleans, and you got a Charlotte. Okay, so 3 games that maybe you can win even without your 2 stars, possibly. But I'm not saying that's even a given. You just don't know. Portland potentially could beat them, but those other 7 games without those 2 guys, I mean, you're going to be expected to lose all of those games. They've already lost 5 straight. Let's just say they go 3-7 in the next 10. Oof. All right. And you get back, Kyrie, whatever, at the end of the month, you're a 500 team over halfway through the season. And now you've got to try to figure out how to get everybody together, get everybody healthy, get on the same page, and start winning at a high level to make your run and climb in the standings in the West. This is really bad news for Dallas. I'm not saying it completely removes them from contention, because I still don't know who the second best team in the Western Conference is. I don't know who that is. I know who the best team is. They might be the best team in the league, Oklahoma City, but we don't know who the second best team is. So if you can put yourself in that position and avoid Oklahoma City, and maybe you can still make a run to the conference finals and have to deal with them at some point anyway. Okay, it could still work out that way for Dallas, I guess. But the bottom line is this is a team that's going to have a basically 4 to 6 week stretch of losing games by the time they get fully healthy. That's a bad place to be in the West with the amount of teams you're going to have to climb over.
And it almost feels inevitable just because I don't know what the hope is. I'll ask you that here in just a second about who steps up, and if we're surprised, who would it be? But to your point, they play the Lakers, who they're tied with in the standings right now. So that's a big, presumably you lose that game, and that's a big loss. You play Minnesota, who's one of the teams that's chasing you in the standings and could catch up to you. And then, of course, Oklahoma City and Denver. Denver could create separation. So it's not just that they're tough games. They're tough games against the teams that you're fighting for positioning with. And you mentioned, the schedule where those guys are out. How about the schedule when they get back? Because if you just assume they're going to struggle during that stretch you just went over, you get back in February, well, congratulations, you got a 5-game road trip. New Orleans, Detroit, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Boston. Then you have Houston at home, Sacramento, Golden State, Miami, and then you're at the All-Star break. Those are all tough. So then you talk about you have a herniated disc you recovered from. The worst thing you could do is go on a 5-game, 9-day road trip. You're on the road. You're in different beds every single night. So I worry about the Mavs. But to my earlier question I prompted you for, if they are to surprise us and actually play even or even a little bit better than that, how is it going to happen?
I mean, where does your offense creation come from, Adam, with the rest of their roster? Spencer Dinwiddie?
Yeah.
I mean, Quentin Grimes. I mean, these are the guys creating your offense. You're going to expect that much more out of PJ Washington, Najee Marshall, Klay Thompson. You're going to ask him to start going to ISO again, like at the end of his run in Golden State when it was just bad to watch. Like, I really don't know. So what you have to do in this situation, you have to become better defensively than what you were to give yourself a chance to get to 100 points and hope that you could do something defensively against these teams that at least gives you a chance. But even then, you're in the game. It's a 1-possession game with 4 minutes to go. Now what? When it's been Luka, and occasionally mixed in with some Kyrie as the lead in that situation, but it's primarily Luka. But at least if Luka's out and you do have Kyrie, he can take on that role. He's done it many times throughout his career. Now, where do you go to get that offense just to create traffic and draw multiple defenders? Like, they don't have anyone else on their roster really capable of doing that. So it's got to come from the defensive end of the floor. Let's see what they're made of and what they're capable of on that end. But this is a situation now where it's almost like, okay, put Dallas away for a month. I don't need to watch them. What do what's the point? You can't judge this team until you get those two guys back after the All-Star break.
So if this happens and they fall between now and the All-Star break, let's just go to the All-Star break. Even if those guys are back, you're still getting back into shape, you're, game speed and everything else. If they get to the All-Star break and they are 500 team or below, and that means, in my opinion, they're probably an 8, 9, 10 seed in the West with, about 30 games to go or so. Are they just doomed at that point to being a play-in team? Or do you think, projecting that far out, that there's still a chance they can regroup after the break, get healthy, get hot, and then be, a top 6 team, at least to avoid the play-in? So you don't have to go that route.
They've got 20 games before the All-Star break.
Man, that's a lot.
They've got 20. Conservatively speaking, they go 6-14. 7-13. I think based on what we just described their schedule, I think that's fair. I mean, I think that's not crazy. This team's not going 10-10. They're going to go like 6-14 in their next 20 games. That's my prediction.
Okay.
And if that's the case, they're 4 games under 500 at that point, with a sprint to the playoffs. And probably at that point, if you're 4 games under 500, you're outside the play-in. That's where I think they're going to find themselves with about 30, low 30s, whatever the number is, going to be 20s. What they played 36,
26. It'd be 26.
Oh God, not even 30. 26 games left. You're going to be outside the play-in and probably 3 to 4 games under 500. That's the scenario, man. I don't know how that changes.
Yeah, that's a tough one, man. That's really tough. Well, let's start breaking down a game. The Mavs are at a tight spot, man. And we were talking at the start of the year, this felt like the year they could maybe be a top seed coming off of last year. They never do it. That dream almost seems shattered right now. It's hard to imagine them weathering this and bouncing back well enough to be a top 3 seed. So that means you're almost certainly going on the road at least for 2 or 3 rounds of the playoffs. Let's start to break down some games. So some interesting stuff happened last night. We talked about it briefly yesterday, but the plan was to bring Bradley Beal off of the bench for the first time in 9 years. He would have to come off of the bench. Yusuf Nurkic also went to the bench. Ryan Dunn as well as Mason Plumlee get the start. And the Suns get a win over the very shorthanded 76ers. No Joel Embiid, but 109-99, they get the win. And the bench, including Bradley Beal, who had 25 points, the Suns bench outscored Philly's bench 54-7. That's what stands out to me. What stood out to you about this game here, Legs?
Well, first, when you're going to make the lineup change, it helps if you can catch a break, and they get one because Embiid's out again, foot sprain. So Joel Embiid doesn't play. And so now here you are, you're on the road and you're going to make this change. And it was reported earlier in the day before they were going to do this, mix it up. And I'll tell you what, I liked what I saw out of this group, this mixture of players. Because you had Ryan Dunn and Mason Plumlee on the floor, and Ryan Dunn has, somebody we both like very much. And he started off the year shooting the ball very well. And then he went into a tailspin from the three, and he just hasn't been making them. And, when you're coming off the bench, it's more spot minutes. You're not exactly sure night to night what your minutes are going to be, when the shots are going to come. And when you're not a great shooter, and he was certainly coming into the league, people thought he was never going to make threes as a pro. And he started to show some potential in preseason early in the year that, okay, you know what? Maybe this guy's got a chance to get up to the upper 30 percentile range as a three-point shooter. If that's the case, you now have a player, man, because this guy can flat out defend. He can guard 3-4 different positions on the floor, incredibly long arms, a lot of desire on that end of the floor. But he went into this tailspin from the three. But now, okay, you start him. Maybe now as a starter, I don't know, it could unlock something for him a little bit. Because number one, if you start, you're probably going to play 30 minutes most nights. He knows that.
A rhythm.
Yeah, you know that now. And you also know you're going to be out on the floor for the first 7-8 minutes minimum at the start of the game and at the start of the second half. So coming right out of warmups, you've taken your shots, you're feeling good. You don't go sit on the bench for 15 to 20 minutes of real time, and you're not a shooter anyway, and now you come in and the shots are spread out. It's just a different mentality as a starter coming right out of warmups into the game, and then you've got freedom to take some shots. You know what? He goes 3 for 6 from the three, and I'm not saying that's going to be every night, but it's a good start for him. His defense was great. He gives you 15 points. Great defense all over the floor, primarily guarding Paul George, holds him to 4 for 15 on the night as the primary defender on him. So you get a benefit there. And I thought Plumlee, just his energy level's a little bit different than Nurkic. Nurkic's a much better rebounder, a much better player. Let's be honest. He's just a better basketball player skill-wise. But Plumlee is like, okay, I don't need anything done for me at all. You never have to throw me the ball. And I'm just going to keep running up and down the floor and just trying to make some stuff happen. And his stat line was modest, 13 minutes, 7 boards, pretty good there, but only 1 shot, 2 points, no big deal. Only played 13 minutes. They still went to Nurkic for 14 minutes, and they played small the rest of the time.
Yep.
I actually liked what I saw out of them last night. It looked like a little bit more of a well-rounded team when they had that unit out there. More defensive-minded, obvious focus on where the ball was going with Durant and Booker. Just do your thing. And then the key was this, Adam, was Bradley Beal going to have some bounce in his step coming into the game? And he absolutely did. He played with joy. He was having fun. He was making shots and talking to his own bench and enjoying the moment. He had a great night, 25 points, totally outplayed Philly's bench all by himself. And it was a pretty well-rounded win, albeit against a very short-handed team without their best player. But that's okay. The Suns need wins anywhere they can get them. This was a good start. The defensive effort was better, and I thought their offensive flow was better in staggering this lineup this way and getting a more defensive-minded unit out there to start the game.
I was listening in on our partner site, PHLY's Sixers postgame show, and they had this comment that the Sixers have been the get-right team for everybody. Sacramento been struggling. They play the Sixers. They got right. Warriors been struggling. They play the Sixers. They got right. Phoenix has been down. They play the Sixers, and they get a feel-good win. This was the down-bad bowl, and Phoenix is the one that kind of gets to feel good for a moment here. But your point about obviously missing Embiid is the story here, and Mason Plumlee played 13 minutes. Yusuf Nurkic played 14. That's not a lot of minutes for your center. What they went with was Oso Ighodaro, the rookie, at center for some of these stretchy lineups, and it really killed Philadelphia, and in particular Yabusele, who's had a good year, But when he has to go to center and you're able to stretch out, this was one of the things I wondered about putting even Beal to the bench. Does it allow you for some more of these staggered super small ball lineups? And I think if you were buying Phoenix coming into the year, you were buying that they could play big, but that they have these stretchy lineups that could really hammer benches. And at least last night that happened. And getting to play Bradley Beal off of the bench gives you that flexibility to go to some of those lineups. But that's at least one thought I have with, if I'm trying to talk myself into Phoenix, that's one thing I have is those stagger lineups now can have a personality consistently with a little bit more spacing because you're not worried about a starting center. Most teams' backup center is not that good.
Listen, I'm down on them overall. I mean, they're gonna have to do a lot to change my mind. One game
trying over here.
One game against Philly, who's
shorthanded.
Embiid. Yeah, but again, these teams that have found themselves in these situations that they've underachieved, you got to start somewhere. Yeah. And so let's start there. Let's start against Philly. They still had Tyrese Maxey and Paul George. You still have two top tier offensive players. And you get this win, and it's good. I think for me, the Bradley Beal component was interesting because he wasn't out there at the start of the game in this hybrid role, like handle the ball a little bit and then get it up the floor and then give it up.
True.
What am I? Am I first half of the shot clock player? Am I spot up guy? What am I? When you come off the bench last night, there was no question what he was going in the game to do. It was very clear to him. He took 15 shots. He took more shots than Durant. How many games since Bradley Beal's been playing with Kevin Durant has he taken more shots than Durant? And that's kind of how it's supposed to go with three stars. And on a given night, two of those guys, you don't know who it's going to be. Like two of those guys are going to get more of the shots. That's the way it usually works out. And he felt like he was always the short end of the stick as far as that went. Part of it was him, his personality type of thing. Part of it was he was the obvious choice to kind of take on that role. Whatever the case, it didn't really work out that well with the three of them. I felt his approach was different. He checked into the game, and he checked into the game with a very specific purpose. So now I'm not this hybrid guy as a starter. I am now Jordan Clarkson. I am now Jamal Crawford back in the day. I am now pick your six man that comes in and tries to light it up. That's what he played like. And I don't know. I liked it. Now, here's the thing. Does that mean Bradley Beal's happy? I don't know. If he faked his way through it and he played well. Look, when you make some shots early, you're going to be happier. If he missed his first five, maybe he mopes and pouts. I don't know, but he didn't. He made shots and he looked like he was into the game. We'll see how that goes going forward. And also this notion of, hey, man, part of this is because we got to get him to waive his no trade so we can get him out of here. They asked him about it after the game. Did you see his comment?
He said, I hold all the cards.
Yeah, I hold all the cards, which I actually thought I love the answer because it's true.
It's true.
They gave it to him. They gave him a stacked deck. It's up to him. And how many? I don't know if this is correct. I think I read somewhere where like a couple of guys in the league have a no trade. He's one of them. Bradley Beal has a no trade. So him saying that I thought was actually funny because he's probably a little bit pissed off how this is all played out. He kind of feels like they've made him the scapegoat of why this isn't working. And so now he has a chance to exert a little bit of puff your chest out. And he did it when he was asked that question. And he, what do you think about the trade rumors? Well, you know what? Until they say something to me and they get my clearance, I'm not going anywhere because I hold all the cards. I thought it was a great answer. And I actually respected that. I really did. And he said that because he, some way you have to manifest that you're kind of irritated.
Yeah.
He played, he showed up and he played. Good for him. He handled it well. And now there was this other part of it. Like, you know what? Don't come to me with that until the Suns bring it up because I'm not going anywhere unless I say so. I thought it was great.
Just make sure everybody knows. And he even said, I believe, that there wasn't a conversation. We're going to talk about Mike Conley here in a second, but there was a conversation to sit down, this or that. It was kind of like he just was found out you're not starting anymore. And I think that bothered him as well. Let me ask you about Devin Booker, because Booker might ask to come off the bench seeing what happened with Beal. Beal's been struggling. He goes to the bench and he has himself a nice night. Devin Booker, 3 of 16 last night, having the least efficient career season since 2017. And he's just been on the struggle bus this year. So what do you see from him? Is there something going on with him, with the team, with his role that is causing him to play so poorly this season?
I don't know, man. I wish I could put a finger on it because when I watched, if I just watched Devin Booker in a vacuum last night, I'm saying to myself, man, like he looks exactly like the guy that played exactly the same way, took the same exact
Yeah.
shots, and had a 35-point game. So I don't know why. It wasn't like he was locked up all night. It wasn't like he was lacking aggressiveness. It wasn't like he was just, he looked like mentally he wasn't into it. In fact, I was watching the game and I was thinking to myself, one thing I like about Devin Booker, man, even when he's struggling, I feel like he still plays with intensity all the time. Um, and he seemed like that again last night. So I wish I could put a finger on it as to why it's just fewer of these big Devin Booker type nights that we're used to have taken place this year. I really don't have a great answer for you, man, because I thought last night he had clean looks and he goes 3 for 16 in the game.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. Like, we're going to talk up every team when they play and we're going to do this and that, but I'm with you on the Suns, where I just have a hard time thinking this makes a meaningful impact on their season. I have a hard time with the Sixers. Same thing. I mean, the nice thing about the Sixers is they're in the East, so they're always within striking distance, but both of these teams, to me, I'm not really compelled with or convinced of in any positive way. Let's take a break. On the other side, I want to talk about another lineup change. Mike Conley goes to the bench and the Wolves get to the win. Are those things correlated or just happenstance? We'll talk about that on the other side. First, let me tell you about FanDuel. Playoffs are here for the NFL. It's not too late to get in on all of the action at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get 200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. That's 200 in bonus bets, win or lose. I like this because before it said you had to win your bet. Now it's guaranteed. You just place it and you get 200 in bonus bets. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays, and so much more. Plus, when you win, you'll get paid instantly. Just visit FanDuel.com/AllNBA to join today and get started with 200 bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/AllNBA. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Here's the long disclaimer. Must be 21 and older and present in select states, or 18 plus or present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Also want to tell you guys about Shady Rays. Get ready for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglass company offering world-class products rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures. They have hundreds of options to choose from, so you're bound to find the perfect pair to match your style. I go with Navigators or Aviators, but they probably have a style that's in your favorite team's colors. So if you want to throw something on to wear to the game this weekend, you can get those. Even those ski goggles, if you're going to be freezing, if you're going to Buffalo to watch Broncos versus Buffalo, you probably want to be covered twice over head to toe. So you got to get those goggles that your eyes are not exposed to that negative 10 degrees they have up there in Buffalo. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com and use code AC35 for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. All right, back here, segment 2. Legs, what's the coldest sporting event or football game you've ever attended? Do you remember?
It has to have been, well, I'm sure it was one of the NFC championship games I went to when I was younger with the Redskins in RFK Stadium. You're talking, January. Yeah, that's probably the coldest, because I've been to cold weather cities before to see them play, but it's typically earlier in the year when it's not as cold in those places. But yeah, so I don't know. I want to say definitely probably low teens would be my guess, with the wind chill probably, pushing it closer to 0. Yeah.
Some of these Buffalo games where they have everybody come show up to scrape the 3 feet of snow off of the seats or something like that. I'm a big fan, man, but I'm not a fan enough to do that. I'll watch from home.
Can I tell you real quick then along this lines? I got a real quick 60-second story. Coldest a city I ever went to as a player. I was in the CBA when I got out of college. I was playing in the CBA, which is now the G League for people that don't know what the CBA was. Playing in Omaha, Nebraska. We went to play a game in Fargo, North Dakota, and it was in the winter. And I was in the room getting ready to go on the bus to the game, and I was watching the local news, and a guy in a blizzard, it was snowing like crazy outside. A guy had kind of drifted off the road, lost sight of the road, and his car got into a ditch, and he couldn't get out. And he got out of the car, and he tried to make it like a half a mile to a gas station, and his eyelids froze shut.
Oh my God.
Okay. And just so happened, like a plow happened to be coming by, like a state worker, and they rescued the guy. But this is my point. This is how cold it was in Fargo, North Dakota. Then we go to the game. It's so cold inside the building that you had to wear basically like these mittens when you were on the bench to keep your hands warm because you could see your breath inside the arena because they were trying to save money. There was probably 100 people there. There was like 5 NBA scouts. I think I had like 30 in that game, though. I do remember that. But because I was so desperate to get out of the CBA.
The hands were warm. Maybe that was the key.
You had to wear double layer of gloves like Lloyd Christmas, wearing a second set this whole time. That's what I felt like on the bench. So like that just when you started a question with coldest whatever, I immediately flashed back to Fargo, North Dakota.
Bus ride, by the way, was it bus ride or is it a flight in?
It was no, we were on the road. I think we actually were taking a couple of vans from the hotel over to the arena, if I recall correctly, back in those days.
Yeah. We played at Western State in college one time, which is like 11,000 foot elevation up in the mountains. And I remember showering after the game, had to walk about 50 feet to our van, and my hair turned into dreadlocks, icicle dreadlocks in that 20-second walk.
I wish there was a picture of that.
Imagine, also think about playing basketball at 10,000 feet. That's the one thing I remember. Mile High City, that's twice that. That's 2 miles up, and you're gasping for oxygen while you play. All right, enough old war stories. Let's talk about the Timberwolves and the Clippers. Kawhi is back. This is game number 2 for him. He goes for 21 minutes and 8 points on just 3 of 11 shooting. But the real story, to me at least, is that the Timberwolves went to their own change in starting lineup. Mike Conley, who I think has started every game of his career for 18 years, comes off of the bench for the first time. And that changeup, unlike the Bradley Beal one, this one almost feels a little bit more it's not that we see a problem and we're trying to address it because this will fix it, but it's more we got to do something. And even if this doesn't make sense, we're going to go for it. You put DiVincenzo in there. The DiVincenzo, Anthony Edwards, McDaniels, Randall, Gobert fivesome is a minus 17.5 net rating going into last night. So it's not like it was a lineup that they had not tried or a lineup that was working. This actually had not been working, but they knew they needed to mix it up to make their staggers work. And they come back to win this one. So what happened in this game, and what do you make of that change?
First of all, this was a wild game because the Clippers come out and they're just absolutely dominating them. They go up 19, second quarter. It looks like they're going to be cruising to an easy win. Everything offensively is coming easy for them. Their defense, which I've been impressed with all year, was playing great. Chris Dunn was doing a great job on Anthony Edwards. And by the way, they've got a very switchable team because you could put Derrick Jones Jr. on them. You could put a guy like Amir Coffey on them. Kawhi Leonard played last night. Like he can get him a little bit. So Norman Powell's a good defender. They got a lot of guys that you can throw at Anthony Edwards, and everything was going their way. Offensively, it was clicking. Kawhi played pretty well in the first half. And then all of a sudden, Minnesota, man, they just ramped it up defensively. And you could see their desperation to get back in the game. And that's when I said before when we first started, I was kind of teasing what I loved so much about this game. All the games I've watched this year, I'm telling you, there's only been a handful, Adam, that I've watched where two teams played harder for 48 minutes than they did in this game. And I was so impressed by it. And I've been impressed by how hard Clippers have played all year. It's really without, no Kawhi, Paul George out of town. It's Harden's team. And you're like, well, how are they going to do it? They did it. They really changed their identity to a defensive-minded team. And I've been impressed with that all year. Minnesota also can defend. These two teams were playing. This literally looked like this was a game like to make it out of the play-in, or a 2-2 game 5 in the first round, or a game 7. There was that level of intensity about this game. The number of bodies flying all over the floor, the number of guys contesting everything at the rim. They both wanted it, and Minnesota dug so deep defensively just to give themselves a chance. And then they put the ball in the hands of Anthony Edwards, who was absolutely sensational down the stretch. If you didn't see just the last 6 minutes of the game, go watch that and watch Anthony Edwards and what he was able to do to close this thing out. It was incredible what he did offensively last night. But I was just impressed overall with the fight that these two teams showed. And we talked yesterday, I think, about rivalries and matchups and different, we talked about Denver and San Antonio, the Wemby Jokic thing. I would love, based on what I saw last night, give me a series with Minnesota and the Clippers if they play as hard as they did last night, because it almost looked like there was a little bit of not liking each other mixed in there, which I kind of like. And it was just the intensity level off the charts, and Minnesota fought back, and Anthony Edwards took over. That's really the storyline.
We have our guys list, right? The guys we like. We need whatever's the opposite of that. Like, not my guy. I can't stand this guy.
I used to talk about on ESPN. We'd do these segments on NBA Tonight, and I would say I wanted to do. They wouldn't let me do it because my wording was different. It was guys I hate, and I guess they didn't like the way I phrased that, because I know what you're saying. There's that list of guys like, this guy drives me crazy. I can't stand watching him. So I think that's where you're going with this.
I'm going there with the Clippers, and I wonder if you could guess what player I'm talking about, who actually played kind of well last night, but he still drives
Kevin
me nuts.
Porter Jr. It's got to be Kevin Porter Jr.
It's Kevin Porter Jr. Might be my least favorite player in the league, or at least on that list. But I actually thought he was okay last night, especially.
Here's the thing. Here's what's funny about you, man. Here's what's so weird. I kind of agree with you, but not last night. Like, if you're going to bring this point up, there's so many games you could bring this up with Kevin Porter Jr. I actually thought he played pretty under control last night, and he helped them.
That's how I led into it. I mean, he was 7, 6, and 7, and in the fourth quarter was where he got most of that production. He made some really good plays. So that's what I was going to say, is it's weird for me to be shouting out Kevin Porter Jr., but I actually thought he was really good. Amir Coffey as well. This one, honestly, if you look at this, Anthony Edwards, the story, why did Minnesota win this one? Well, they won it in the clutch because Anthony Edwards hit a pair of just tough three-pointers. Just give me the ball and let me score.
The second
was bouncing backwards.
What was the distance? I don't know what the distance was on the second shot. It had to be like 32, 33 feet.
Let me see if I can pull it up real quick, or maybe James can look it up for me. But yeah, it was.
They never listed properly in the play-by-play. I'm just telling you right now. Like, I'll watch it. I'll watch a game, and the next day I'll look at the play-by-play, and it'll say somebody makes a 27-foot three-pointer, and I'm like, are you out of your mind? That's 3 feet behind the line. These guys are like 5 and 6 feet behind the line sometimes. So I don't know what it lists the shot at, but I'm telling you, it was more than 30.
Well, they listed the first one at 24 and the second one at 25. So just to give you they basically said they were the exact same.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a pic. I'm going to freeze the screen and get a picture of this 25-foot 3-point shot that Anthony Edwards hit that was really like 31.
Yeah. I actually have seen a couple of these before. I think you're right about this. I don't know how arbitrary that number is, but that's why they won the game. But I also am curious why the Clippers lost this one, because even when they had blown this game in the second half, because they were up pretty good, going into the half. So when they blew this one in the second half, but still at the end of the game, I thought they were going to be able to pull this one out. So was there something you saw in the close of this game that the Clippers did not do?
Honestly, it came down to the fact they really couldn't deal with Anthony Edwards. But beyond the deep threes, which there's not a lot of defense for that. One was a step back. And a guy draped on him. That was the big one. Gave him the lead. And then the next one he hit was a pull-up out of the backcourt with 2 defenders ready to guard him, and he just rose up from 30+. But it was the drives also and the offensive rebounding that they gave up in that stretch that really hurt them. So it was across the board. Gobert had an impact. He had a fairly modest stat line, like offensively, but his rebounding numbers were huge. And he had 18 boards, 8 offensive rebounds. And so often the Clippers were getting caught with Zubac getting dragged with like some of these ball screens, and then a shot would go up and he would turn and try to get back down there to chip, to get a body on Gobert. And he's hoping to get a chip from one of their guards. And like twice this was Harden, and he just didn't even come close to getting around in front of Gobert. Gobert just goes up and gets a couple putbacks. So the offensive rebounding and the inability to contain Anthony Edwards off the dribble, and then those 2 dagger threes. I mean, that's really what it came down to. Minnesota made those plays when they had to have them. And it's funny because one thing about Anthony Edwards, he's had a weird couple of weeks here, right? I mean, first he had that weird post-game presser where he was like talking about, I'm not out here to be passing the ball all night. And,
you feel me?
You
feel me? I'm a scorer.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
I don't like passing.
You feel me? Feel me? I mean, I'm not like, I'm not Mike Conley out here, man. You know what I mean, man? Come on, man. You know what I mean?
So
I'm trying to
funny.
do my thing, man. I'm still young, man. Like I'm like,
I'm only 23. That would crack me up.
You get out the
I
next
still love
game,
it.
gets 53 and loses the next game.
You're right.
And
This
so
has
it's had
been
a
funny
weird week. The one thing you and I have always said, Adam, the look in his eye, the guy desperately wants to win. And you could see it last night in a game that, look, they're a 500 team. Clippers are a little bit above 500. You're down 20 early. It could have been one of those nights where you just don't have the muster. And he wouldn't allow that to happen to his team. And so I was impressed with his desire and heart and leadership last night to not only make the plays you have to make as the best player, but like just to set the tone with your emotions that you want to win this game badly, even though you're down 19.
The other thing I love about Ant, and again, this is personal preference, but they've been on a little losing streak. They've been struggling 4-6 in their last 10. He hits those shots at the end that basically give him the win. Happiest guy on earth. You know what I mean? Like, I like guys that winning, even just one game, feels the same, and he's one of those guys that just gets so hyped on those types of plays, and I like it. Lastly, before we move on, so what do you make of this change? Because to me, there's an obvious problem in Minnesota, and that is that Julius Randle has really changed this team quite a bit. Presumably you can't send him to the bench. So Chris Finch sat down with Mike Conley and asked him if it was okay for him to go to the bench. And of course, Mike Conley, team player, consummate pro, he said, of course, do what you have to do. But I almost feel it's like we can't address the problem. So we have to work around the problem to kind of create something. And this puts the ball in Ant's hands a little bit more. It maybe gives an extra shooter. Mike Conley should be able to shoot, but he's not this year. So you put DiVincenzo out there. Maybe it gets DiVincenzo going. We talked about him. He's kind of been on the upswing, but maybe this is a shot in the arm for him. So do you think this is a long-term solve, or is this something that's kind of just a lateral move for the Timberwolves?
It's going to be a move as long as they win games. That's what it comes down to. Okay. So let's see it, because here's the thing. They don't have an organizer on the floor, but look, if Anthony Edwards is going to handle the ball that much up the floor, what difference does it make? DiVincenzo, it's not like you have guys that are picking people up 90 feet. You know what I mean? There's a couple TJ McConnells in the league, but there's not many of them. So DiVincenzo can advance the ball against anybody. He's not a guy that's going to run pick and roll and create any offense for anyone else. He could come off pick and roll and pull a deep three and maybe turn the corner occasionally, but he's not running that to manipulate the defense. So that's Anthony Edwards' role. So to me, if it's always going to go through Anthony Edwards and Randle anyway, what difference does it make really to have Conley out there if he's struggling to the extent that he is? And I think they're thinking like, hey man, maybe we get better starts. And they didn't get one last night.
They did not get it. Yeah, it did not work.
Maybe that's what they're thinking. And DiVincenzo, look, to your point, he had a horrible start to the year shooting. He started to play much better lately. Maybe that also was kind of why they decided this. Hey, you know what? This guy's finally going a little bit. Now is a good time to go ahead and get him out there at the start of the game and give ourselves a chance. But again, the start wasn't very good, but ultimately they played lineups without Mike Conley that were pretty effective later on in the game. To answer your question, it's going to stay. They're going to stay the course if they can win. If they can win some games at a higher rate than they are now, which is that they're a 500 team. So if they can win at a 60% clip going forward, it's a significant improvement, and they stay with it until they face some sort of pressure one night when they don't have enough ball handling on the court and they realize they're in trouble. But that doesn't happen very often in this league.
I almost feel like it was not a move to help their starts or even closes, but to help everything in between. And maybe it just makes their staggers a little bit better. And I don't want to say that's how that game played out, because I really think that game just came down to Anthony Edwards caught fire, and he's really good and he can win you games like that. But it'll be interesting to monitor. I want to have some fun here with some either ors before we get out of here.
Hey, real quick, can I do one thing real fast with you?
Sure.
Because we have to address it. What did you think of Kawhi last night?
Oh, yeah, good question to go back to him. I thought, first of all, physically looking at him, he looks leaner than I remember, like almost skinnier than I remember. And he just looks really, really rusty. I know you had a little bit of a different perspective, but those are my only notes to him, is it looked like a guy that hadn't played basketball in a year.
Well, I think what I'm seeing is he's a guy that's going to take more threes than he ever has, probably. His mid-range is still going to be effective enough because he doesn't get the lift, but he still gets separation with his shoulders. He's so good at that. He has a wide shoulder base, and he's so good at getting you back on your heels to get enough separation to get it off. But where I noticed, and again, this could just be just not enough basketball conditioning. He had a couple drives that were really awkward because he could not get off the ground. So his inefficiency as a finisher could be something to look at going forward, because if that is just the way the Kawhi Leonard's going to be now going forward, he's just, because he's had a lot of injuries, man. He's had surgeries. He's had so much time off. It could be just attrition. Like, it's just not coming back, that part. Being able to dunk on a guy on a finish, or even get creative in the air and hang and put some English on the reverse layup, like stuff he used to do, because he tried 2 of those last night and it was just bad. He could not get off the ground at all. It's going to make him easier to defend because you're not going to have to worry about him getting all the way to the rim and finishing. So that's going to be interesting for me to watch. That's the one takeaway I had about Kawhi. He only played 20 minutes. He didn't score in the second half. He played okay in the first half. But to me, that's what I noticed more than anything. He had no explosiveness at all on his drives.
Oh, man, I'm glad the chat brought this up. Did we talk about Rudy slapping Zubats? This is the craziest play, and I'm actually more mad at the officials. Do you remember this play? Rudy Gobert gets the ball.
I don't. Remind me of this play.
So Rudy Gobert gets the ball. He goes up, gets blocked by Zubats, tries to jump into him again, and just loses the ball. And out of pure frustration, he just elbows Zubats in the head, or takes an elbow at him at 90 feet from the basket. And the refs just call a common foul. And I'm sitting there thinking, he wasn't making a play on the ball. He actually elbowed him in the body. Zubats didn't do anything. Zubats was just playing defense. And I'm sitting here going, that's the textbook definition to me of a technical foul. Like, he was not making a play on ball. It was purely frustration, and it was dangerous. Like, he catches him in the wrong spot, that could put him out the game. So I was so shocked that they didn't even review the play. Tyler Lue was furious about it. He's like, at least go to the monitor and look at this. He wasn't looking at him. He just swung his elbow behind him. So I thought that was a little crazy, to be honest. And I don't like lots of techs and flagrants, but that was one where I'm like, it had nothing to do with basketball.
You avoided the pillow talk barely here because you still seem like you got a little bit of a problem with it. Okay. So I agree. Look, it was kind of a weird play. Gobert is one of those guys that ends up entangled with people all the time in weird ways. Like Sean Bradley used to do that all the time. Yeah. He always found himself entangled with people. And you get to the point where you go, okay, this isn't just awkwardness. This is intentional. Like, somehow this guy's always mixed up in these things. I agree with you. In fact, I was listening to the Minnesota broadcasters, and they were making a big deal about that, how they couldn't believe that was only a common foul as well. So yeah, I do remember that.
By the way, yeah, there's a lot of like refs calling techs on people for bad looks at officials, saying words to officials, this or that, but elbows to the back of the body, just that's not a tech. A little weird on that. Let's have some fun before we get out of here. I have some either ors for you. 3 of them, in fact, and we just talked about the Wolves. We talked about the Suns. They both picked up wins. They're both struggling. More likely to figure it out this year, the Wolves or the Suns?
I'm going to say Minnesota, because I do think their core is still based on the defensive end of the floor. And I think that's going to give you a better chance. It's a pretty large sample size with Julius Randle. Now, it's not like they've played 8-10 games. They've played, enough games. I do have some questions about how this is all going to work offensively, but I do think it's going to get better. I don't think it's going to get worse than it is now. I think it will improve. I think DiVincenzo was a key part of it. He's playing a lot better than he did at the start of the year. And I think your defense, if that's your culture and identity, and that's something that matters to you on a nightly basis, I think it gives you a better chance. I don't think Phoenix's identity is that, even though they've made changes to reward guys that think that way more. I don't know. There's something that, to me, they've had a large enough sample size over 2 seasons that I just don't know that this is going to work. Even though I was very confident that Mike Budenholzer was going to turn things around in a big way for them, there's just something missing with that group. I have more faith that Minnesota would be a team that's going to be more likely that you're going to have to deal with them and reckon with them in the second half of the year than Phoenix.
The vibes seem worse in Phoenix. I think the upside is higher, but they just never seem to get close. I mean, there's no reason to think they're going to untap that upside. So I think I'd go Minnesota too, but to be honest, I'm selling both teams. I don't think I'm buying either. More likely to make the second round, Memphis or Houston? Both of them having great years. Maybe it's both, but I'm curious if you had to pick, who's more likely in your opinion at this moment?
I'm not going to sit on the fence, but I'm saying I think they're equally likely. I don't think you can really say. Obviously, a lot of that's going to depend on who you're playing. Well, yeah, a little bit, I guess, but no, because I don't think I'm sitting on the fence. I'm saying I could see both of them doing it. Like, it's not going to shock me. It's going to depend on who you're playing and how healthy your opponent is, because a lot of these teams are dealing with stuff. So I don't know who they're going to play. I think both of those teams are capable of playing into the second round. If you absolutely forced me to pick one or the other, I would probably say Memphis.
Okay. Why? Does Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson,
Ja Morant factor a little bit. Yeah. They've got a little bit more collective experience with that, with playoffs and like those types of environments and games. But look, I don't want to sell Ime Udoka and Houston short. Like, they're clearly one of the toughest teams in the NBA. Yeah. And they play with a maturity level beyond their years offensively. So I think both of those teams have a great chance, particularly based on some of the issues that some of these supposed contenders are having, and some of the shortcomings and injuries they're dealing with, roster turnover. Wouldn't shock me either way if either one of those teams made it out.
Houston almost feels doomed at this point and I think they're a great team, but if there is a Dallas that's like a 7-8 seed or, maybe even a 6 seed, it feels like Houston is destined to make the playoffs, but get matched up with a team that probably should have been a 2 or 3 seed and is peaking at that point. So that could be tough. All right. Last one, most likely to win 70 games, Oklahoma City or Cleveland. They're both currently on pace for 70 wins, which is crazy. But who do you think is more likely to hit it?
Man, oh man. I'm going to say the Cavs. And I also want to know, I was thinking this morning, how many teams in history, we don't have the answer to this now, maybe we should look this up before our next show, because it'll be the day after the Cavs Thunder game. How many teams in history have had winning streaks of 15 and 10 before the All-Star game?
That's crazy.
Because they're 31-4, and we've had teams get off to incredible starts in the past. But these are really long winning streaks by NBA standards. Like, to win 10 games in a row in the NBA is very rare. You might get a team or two do it every year. I'm sure there's been years where nobody did it. They've already had 2 of those. And if they knock off Oklahoma City, I mean, who knows how long this one will go. I think Cleveland ultimately has more of a chance. I also think there's probably more, it's more likely than not that Cleveland has to play this thing out through the wire. Meaning,
with Boston chasing.
You're 5.5 up on Boston. Boston is going to have one of their significant runs too. They're going to win 8-10 games in a row. Maybe close that gap a little bit.
Might be starting soon.
I think Oklahoma City, they finally get the full strength. They might have a 10-game lead going into the last 3 weeks of the season. And then now you start really thinking about who's playing on a given night, and maybe you sacrifice some games late. I think Cleveland more likely to be pushed by somebody behind them than anybody that Oklahoma City is going to see.
That's not exactly a number you're chasing either. The 72 win thing that the Warriors did years back, breaking that record, that's big, right? Because you're in the record books forever. But just getting to 70 is not really a number. So I think you're right that being chased is really going to be the bellwether for this, and the Cavs have a chance. They're both so good, though. They're both win easy. They win hard, but they also win easy, and that's why they're up there. Lastly, now, Boston is in Denver tonight. I'll be watching that game. By the way, TNT has the games tonight. Lakers, Mavs, 2 West Coast teams. That's the early game. Nuggets versus Celtics with an East Coast team. That one starts at 8:00, 10:00 Eastern time. Is Boston even staying up to watch that game? I don't know. But Boston at Denver tonight should be a great game. It's the last two champions, but both of them have been a little up and down here over the last couple of weeks. What are you looking for in this one?
Yeah, man. Look, Boston, for a team that won a championship and kind of coasted on their way to that championship, and you run it back basically with the exact same roster, they're 26-10, man. They've got 10 losses already. And they look at what they've done over the last couple of weeks. Like, they look vulnerable. I know that it seems like every night they're playing shorthanded. I understand that, but they still have more depth of talent than anybody else. So that's the whole point about having that kind of depth. You can win games when you are shorthanded. And so I don't want to use that as an excuse for them. This would be, Denver's playing better. Like, this would be considered a really high quality win for the Celtics to be able to go there and do it. And who knows, maybe reestablish some momentum.
Yeah, I think if Aaron Gordon, because Denver last year was 2-0 against Boston. Two very good games. Some of the best regular season games of the year last year came down to the wire. Both teams played at their top level. Like, Boston brought the best out of Denver. But I think not having Aaron Gordon takes away this. What makes this game so interesting is style fights. Denver points in the paint, Boston 3-pointers. Denver, the worst team in the NBA at 3-pointers, Boston, the best team. So that's what makes that matchup so interesting. But if you don't have Aaron Gordon, I'm just not sure Denver's going to be able to punish them the way you can use that physical advantage. So I think that probably gives a pretty heavy advantage to Boston in this one. But I'm interested to see what happens. It would be a huge win for Denver if they were to get it. And kind of a statement week for them. So I'll be curious to see what they come out and look like.
Let me ask you a question. You're a perfect person to ask. So Boston's coming into Denver, their only appearance of the year. You see what's going on in that building every night. Is this going to generate more of a response from the crowd? Is there more excitement about the Celtics coming in, or what team generates that? Or is it the same every night? Because the Nuggets fans are so great. Like, is it the same every night, or are there teams that are going to get more talk around town leading up to it, and like just a higher level of intensity in the building and in the air? Will Boston generate that, or is there some other team that does that at a higher level for them?
I think Boston will. Denver has a handful of rivalry teams that when they come in, it's a big deal. Minnesota's one of them. Phoenix is one of them. Lakers are one of them. I think this one, though, is just such a high-profile game because it's the two most recent champions that this one will be big. But Denver, unfortunately, is a transplant city. There's a lot of Boston people in Denver. Crime's way up for the last 10 years.
You're going to have Green in the building? You're telling me you're going to have Green in there?
We might have a little bit, man. There might, we'll have to have extra security on hand because, those Boston guys, man, they smell. They're dirty. They bring all that stuff to my beautiful city. So it's a real bummer, man. It's a real bummer.
Hey, for everybody out there watching right now and that will watch this, that was Adam that said that people in Boston are just get that clear. That's Adam on that side of your screen. This leg's on this side. Okay. Just make sure
I always love to, by the way, anytime we talk anybody against Denver, someone will pop in the chat and say, Adam's a hater of that team. Yeah, man, I'm going to hate them all when they come into Denver. That's my job. All right, let's get to our super chats. What do we have here, James? How many we got? Super chat from Jay. He says, hey, guys, appreciate all you do and the passion with which you do it. What is the best outcome for the Heat with the Butler saga? Also, Lakers win the 25 NBA championship. Reverse engineer how it happened. Thanks a lot. I'd have a better job reverse engineering a spaceship, I think, than the Lakers winning the championship this year. But what do you think real quickly on the Butler saga? Is there a best outcome for them?
No, it's just, I think, to move them at the timing of your choice. Don't overreact to this right now and make a deal that could possibly be sweetened as you get a little closer to the trading deadline. I think there's no question he's got to move on. This is an untenable situation now. Everything he's doing is sort of anti-Heat culture and everything that they're about and represent. This is I think, an impasse that cannot be resolved. He's got to go. I guess if the question is, what are you trying to get back in return? I guess that depends on who you're talking to and who you're dealing with. To me, Jimmy Butler only makes sense for a team that feels like they can win it this year. That's the only way I add Jimmy Butler. I think I can win a championship this year, and he could be the difference maker. If that's the case, you probably also have some young talent on that team that's helping you right now. That's what Miami has to get back.
I think the best scenario is a hidden team enters the equation, drives up the price, and hopefully maybe has something better. And you know what? This is why, and I'm not saying it will be Dallas because I don't think it will be, but this is why you wait to the deadline, because an injury happens to a team that had high aspirations and all of a sudden they're desperate. We can't punt on the season. We can't let that go by the wayside. Again, I'm not saying it will be Dallas, but something like that makes another team who was not open to a trade much more open to a trade, and you just wait for that to happen. As for the Lakers, I have no idea. El Revoltillo says, hey guys, who do you think is better, Giannis or KD? I said to my friends, Giannis. Everyone was looking at me like I'm crazy. What do you think? Love the show. I can't imagine saying KD. And KD had a great – are you saying at their peaks maybe or right now? Because right now it's clear in my opinion.
Well, at their peak, it's I think I'd go Durant, but they're not at their peak right now. Giannis very much very close to his peak. Durant, still a very, very good player in this league. Great player, really. But – yeah, I mean, right now you probably have to say Giannis just because of the number of different ways he affects the game. But Durant at his peak. First of all, to be honest, it's a weird comparison.
Yeah,
like I don't know. I wouldn't put those two guys in the same sentence in picking because they're so different in the way that they play.
All right, cue that outro music. That does it for today, Legs. We're off tomorrow, but in between we got Boston, Denver, and then we've got that great Cleveland OKC matchup. That's what we're going to be talking about almost for sure on Thursday, as well as some of the other games that are going on. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to both of those games, Legs. What do you think?
I can't wait. And I'm actually on Countdown, the pregame show for that Cleveland OKC game. And I'll be out in LA the next couple days doing some NBA Today, talking about prepping for that game and then the post game as well. So I'm going to have my hands all over that thing. Can't wait.
Volume up, everybody. Tune in for the pregame. Make sure you catch that and hear what Legs has to say entering that game. We'll be breaking it down afterwards on Thursday, though. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and that like button on this episode. We'll see you guys. Have a nice day off.
Silly like the mayor.